Welcome to the stage, and I'm so excited to have this dialogue about future of transport and logistics in the region. Ivano, let me start. And first question, please tell us, how is Green Economy Partnership is advancing resilience and sustainability across regional transport and logistics?
Thank you very much, and let's try to make this as engaging as possible. Well, when we look at, let me start with the name. We chose the word partnership on purpose. Things are moving quite fast on the legislative front. So I'm just coming back from Brazil. I was in Belém. I was looking at carbon markets and market-based mechanisms. And in doing so, how does this impact, how is it cascading down to the local governments and jurisdictions? Now, when we look at how GEP, the Green Economy Partnership, actually facilitates the transport and logistic industry, it's quite simple. Well, for once, you have the IMO starting to implement legislation related to CO2 emission as early as a few weeks away from now. But also, in the greater scheme of things, we're looking at resources. We're looking at time. We're looking at fuel being consumed to move merchandise, equipment, SKUs from point A to point B. How can we do this more efficiently and in coordination with others? And whereas before it was a choice, is now a compliance matter. And what we try to help is entities and governments create these pathways which generate commercial resilience. Yes, there will be change, it will be uncomfortable, but it will be also opportunistic for those entities that have a drive to provide a better class of service, which costs them less because it's more resource efficient, but at the same time can also comply with the overall mandate at a global level.
Thank you. And what policies or market mechanisms accelerates in sustainable transformation?
Well, I'm a development economist, so everything for me is based on numbers. I do have quite a bit of numbers to leverage, specifically in the CO2 dynamics. And CO2 for me is the common denominator of resources. So I can translate how much water you use, how much power you use, how much fuel you use, how many raw materials are utilized in a certain process by equating them through their global warming potential and creating a baseline for it that I can compare across your peers, across regions, across industries. Now, what has happened with the advent of the Paris Agreement, on the 1st of January 2021, the agreement took place from a soft law, so a general international law, into being nationalized and implemented in different countries. So targets have been set, but incentives are still there for those early movers to actually mature technology, mature markets, and being able to take market share away from high-intensity entities, high-intensity providers, those that actually do not even know about the subject matter in itself. Now, to give you a quick example, I've been working with Emirates Global Aluminium for the past 4 years to implement their CBAM policy, so Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. A third of the metal that they produce here in the UAE goes to Europe. And the last thing that I knew when I started this is that I would have had to deal with the logistics family, so to say, and their reluctance to implement the system. Now, EGA was very well prepared at the funding to do a digital platform and everything. However, the last mile was a gentleman who had to key the info inside the EU portal, and that was the bottleneck. Not because he really didn't want to do it, but it was outside of his comfort zone. The upskilling was completely missing, and as a result, the whole process was delayed, customers not served. So obviously, when we look at incentives, early adopters tend to catch all these benefits from efficiency, economics, and market share, whereas the late adopters have to just abide to what is out there.
Thank you so much. Captain Saif, could you please share how you're integrating smart and low-carbon technologies into marine and port operations?
Thank you. In AD Port Group, we have achieved 18% reduction in GHG emissions intensity per TEU from the year 2021 till 2024. And this is due to a number of steps that we take in our approach toward decarbonization and net zero. That starts with being efficient in operations. So efficiency in operations, that include monitoring tools like maritime emission portals, where we are monitoring all of the emissions in our assets, as well as we have efficiency routing, route optimization for passage planning in our vessels as well. And all of these contribute to less fuel consumption, over 5%. That's only from voyage optimization. In addition to that, there are a number of tools that we used, such as low Earth orbit satellites that we started using recently, which will give very accurate data about our vessels, their location, meteorology, which we can deploy in AI solutions as well. So all of these things are like the efficiency part we are doing. Another step which we also doing is electrification. So we have number of our fleet, even the cars rented by the whole group, all of them are energy efficient. And we have 2 tugboats who are fully electrical tugboats that's working in Khalifa Port, as well as a pilot boat. Number of other initiatives that we are doing through electrification is having most of our operation run converted through electricity by the electricity grid. And also we are supporting vessels visiting by providing ship-to-shore connection. Another initiatives that we are doing is through alternative fuel. So we have providing the first ship-to-ship LNG bunkering took place in Khalifa Port earlier this year, and a number of other initiatives related to dual fuel LNG in 2 of our RoRo vessels, UGR Samha is one of them, and as well as we are exploring biofuel in one of our autonomous survey vessels, and we signed an agreement with the private sector in Kizad, Khalifa Port as well, for storage and terminal for LNG. And as well as we signed an agreement with Masdar and Advario to explore production of e-methanol and exporting of e-methanol. So all of these initiatives that we are doing in parallel. And also the last one will be the renewable energy. So renewable energy, utilization of solar panels in our local and international operations that we are doing. For example, 95% of our power usage in Spain is from clean energy sources. So these are a lot of initiatives that we are doing, all of them in parallel, plus R&D, which also we are doing on board the ships.
This is very valuable initiatives, and of course efficiency is the key. So one more question, Captain Saif. What is the most impactful steps marine sector can take to reduce emission over the next 5 years?
We all know that there were strategy accepted by the International Maritime Organization for a commitment of net zero by 2050, with clear milestones between up to 2030 and 2040. So 20 to 30% reduction in 2030. This is as per the commitment. The framework is a little bit, has been prepared, but they are refining it, will come for adaptation maybe next year. So what are the immediate steps we can do? Because the maritime sector is the hardest to abide to decarbonization because of the nature, because of the size of the vessels, because of the size of the cargo. It's not easy to electrify, it's not easy to do, and the availability of the alternative fuel is not as per demand. And the conventional fuel is more attractive right now. So what they can do in the next 5 years, I think to support the work which is already happening toward adaptation to alternative fuel, maybe not starting with the very aggressive ones like hydrogen, but starting to convert to LNG. LNG is emitting 20% less emissions than the conventional fuel, which is something easy adaptation, availability is there. And collaboration is important, especially for technologies which is available now, such as carbon capture. So we are having also an MOU with Samsung to do a carbon capture technologies on board our vessels. So this will save 70% of the emissions if it was fully done. So working on these R&Ds, working on existing alternative fuel for next 5 years, we can meet somewhere closer to the 20-30% reduction required. But going forward from there, we need to do more work toward the alternative fuel, basically more intensively.
Thank you, Captain Saif. Maen, question to you. How marine construction sector contributes in smarter and more resilient port infrastructure?
There you go. Marina, thanks for the question and thanks for being invited to be here. First of all, let me just take you a bit because I sit between the public and the regulations and being in the private sector, we look at sustainability as a measure of how good is it for business. So every decision we make around sustainability, and I appreciate what Captain Saif just shared with us in terms of what they are doing in Abu Dhabi Port when it comes to all the sustainability initiatives. The question always, is sustainability good for business, and is sustainability available for the marine sector? And the answer to that comes a bit more dangerous compared to where you are on land, because the accessibility offshore and in the marine sector is not as easy as it is. So we try to link, I go back to your question, so we try to link what's happening on the infrastructure and the ports on land and see how we can pick up from that and build on it as we are offshore. The challenge always remains is what is the accessibility to some of these advanced technologies on the infrastructure, and how can we either link it to components and offshore. Before this session, I was having a chat with a gentleman just next door, is that could we have potentially a marine vessel that is run on solar? The technology today doesn't exist. It exists on land. It exists, you can actually have a port facility that potentially partially or majority run on solar. And are we going to get there? I think it will come through somehow sooner or later, because this sector is the fastest growing sector between a lot of the industrial. The CAGR of the marine sector is around 14%, which is something that's not seen across other sectors. So we need to now think, how do we invest more in technologies that will enable the sector to be sustainable but profitable?
That's important. Thank you. Maen, and what innovations in engineering or project delivery are enabling to make it more resilient for marine development?
You know, we talk about, you know, what could we do different. And the way I like to think different is to look at, you know, the glass half full and not half empty. And when you are able to do this, then you'll start digging deeper into the opportunities in what you do overall. Talent is a big challenge because, you know, for people to be ready to manage your marine operation, they need certain certifications, certain training, and certain level of experience. And the marine sector has not been very attractive to attracting talent because of the hardship of this sector. Now, that was a similar story probably in the oil and gas. You know, I used to be a field engineer working offshore on rigs, and we used to work in harsh environment, and you will be away from family and land for a long time. So now, how do we bring also, you know, the component of sustainability when it comes to talent development? Because if you don't have talent that are feeding into the funnel and building into the experience of the past, there is going to be a big gap that will be undermined to be filled.
Totally agree. Building the funnel with the talents is the key as well. And just general questions to the speakers. Could you please share your view? What changes need to be for the region supply chain to become truly resilient by 2030?
If I may take the lead, what I personally see is a lot of opinions and very little systematic approaches. So let's start with the fact that unfortunately our industry is polluted by a lot of self-proclaimed experts. Now, nothing wrong with starting a career, but obviously you need to anchor it to some real and tangible experience. Whereas the vast majority of people is there to write a sustainability report, which probably, let's be honest, it will be very rarely be read. Practitioners like ourselves are actually there looking at what you have omitted to state in that specific report, or how is the information published. So for me, and again, I've always been saying the same thing for the past 2 decades, data is key, because it removes the opinion element and it gives me a tangible and solid base that can be shown in terms of how does this actually help. Now, if we look at some of the examples that were shared so far, obviously we cannot put as much batteries as the engine needs on a vessel to power it by solar. Again, I had one of the first solar vehicles that was in circulation, and it had a very small rooftop with a solar panel that produced roughly 100 watts when the car needed kilowatts to be powered. And you can imagine the gap on a single vehicle vis-a-vis a vessel. But what we can do is actually look at the data that we have on hand, create data lakes, and utilize tools that we now have access to, like artificial intelligence, and spend our time creating those algorithms that actually go and navigate those data lakes for efficiencies. Being able to compare, say, the cost of technology vis-a-vis the savings that can be implemented in real time, and being able to tell port authorities, vessel operators, vessel manufacturers that these will become commercially viable in 1, 3, 5 years, rather than leaving it to mainstream to take it upon. Taking consideration, I'm not familiar with the vessels manufacturing industry, but in aviation, as an example, a choice that I take today will become mainstream in 20 years. So even if we look at simple things like circularity in aviation, the little board that sits on our heads in an airplane on an A380, which seems like yesterday actually came into operation, it's made of 17 different types of plastics, none of them recyclable. Obviously, there are reasons for it, but as the aviation industry is looking at circularity today, we will only see this implemented in a decade, let alone maritime industries, port authorities, and so forth, so on. A lot has been done, and it's very laudable, like onshore power. But if you take DP World, for example, just next door, the turnaround time of a vessel loading and unloading is the same as connecting that power. Whereas certain vessels might actually benefit from it, aluminium loading is a lot lengthier in time than it is for a commercial vessel to operate. So certain categories, certain birds, this is your language, I wouldn't be able to assess exactly which term is correct, would benefit from onshore power versus other may not. But also the disposal of biological waste can be turned into other purposes and so forth, so on. So all this is not Ivano's opinion, but rather the aggregation of data over 2 decades, which I personally was able to compare and benchmark against other peers, against other industries and regions. And now I can do by just putting an algorithm in a little AI agent that at a press of a button makes me so happy.
Thank you. Thank you. If you would like to add, Captain Saif.
The supply chain, as much as I was alluding to the talent, is definitely a challenge. Today, if you go and place, an order for a new build out of a shipyard, you're talking about, an average of 3 to 5 years. It depends on its specs. And sometimes the holdup to it is not the vessel hull, it's actually what makes the vessel move, which is the engines. And the propellers, etc. So there is a lot of components. I go back to the reference of the aviation, because at one time I was actually in that sector, and I'm happy that I'm at the sea, not in the air, because the complexity today of supply chain is a challenge. So what do you do? What can you think? You can think on two ways. It's either you plan and invest ahead, which is something that we are doing as we speak. So we are placing orders of new builds, even though that there is no tied-in contract with them, but we know that by the time they come to market, they will be chartered or linked to a process. So you have to have the investment capabilities for you to fulfill that gap of supply chain. And the other component is automation. How do we now move away from the conventional way of running business into thinking and acting in an automation way? I can share with you one of the things that we provide using drones is spill control. So in the past, if there is a spill, you would send 3-4 units to contain the spill, with special containment at sea. Now we have specialized drones that they can fly, go, drop the containment, control sectors, and do it without the intervention of human on site. You know, anything that happens, it happens actually on a control center. So we believe that automation will offset some of that supply chain gap and also fulfill some of the talent shortage.
Thank you, very insightful how we're building the layers, talent, automation, efficiency. So how can GCC Logistic Hub stay competitive globally while moving forward to net zero?
Okay. We are, the GCC are, I can say, leading now toward the sustainability initiatives. And this is something we are very proud of. That's especially from the leading oil producers, that we are looking further in the future and thinking that sustainability is the way forward. And looking at the demand of electricity and power energy requirement for the future now, at the age of AI and the age of the microchips, the age of the how much energy required to run all of these developments and investments that's happening. Having the production of the conventional oil is still on demand. That's why they changed from talking about energy transition to energy addition. But that doesn't mean that we are in the situation where we will be stopping our journey toward a net zero, fully sustainable, decarbonized operation, which we are doing in a fast pace. So the things that is GCC are doing in all fronts are excellent. Further work, I think, to accelerate the decarbonization for the maritime, because as we mentioned, maritime is the hardest. It will require further collaboration. The collaboration is more about making adaptation of clean energy more attractive than the current one. The main challenge, has been highlighted, is the cost. Why we will burden a cost? So who are the first movers? Who are the first one will be doing the adaptation? They will invest a lot. And as a commercial companies, doesn't make sense. So the government, the public sector, private sector, institutes who are working on R&D solutions. So these solutions, many of them are happening, more will come, will accelerate the way we decarbonize. The introduction of AI, which is currently, we can consider AI at its baby steps, like the large language models that we have right now. But in the future, it will be a more accelerator toward sustainability and decarbonization. And we will be the center as GCC for this movement toward sustainable operation, sustainability and lifestyle, as well as adaptation of AI.
Thank you so much. If Ivano, you would like to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to complement what was said. When you raised the topic of supply chain, it's a trigger nowadays. There is so much happening behind the scenes that not everyone is aware of it. So just let me take you quickly through a quick reminder. We started the journey of sustainability, decarbonization, etc. First of all, it was 80% reduction by 2050 when I started. Now we need to achieve net zero. That's thanks to our lack of direct involvement into the actual change. But having said that, it was all about direct emissions. So the big emitters would be the ones reporting. Then he moved on to the second tier, which was indirect emission, which normally known in the industry as Scope 2 emissions. And is now moved to scope 3 as well. Even though legislation does not yet recognize indirect emission as a requirement, it's coming your way. The same way scope 2 emissions have become mainstream. So digital passports actually map the different stages, and obviously the bottleneck is the smallest operators, the smallest service providers who do not have the skill set, or as it was said, the funding required to implement. But not everything has to be paid for. I mean, starting with the data is a big improvement, and tools are there to monitor, to train your staff, to implement practices which are free of cost. So you do not need to engage McKinsey to actually do your carbon accounting. I doubt they would do it anyway if you're small, but rather look at the internet and start. There are tools, there are activities that are free of cost that allow logistic companies at the grassroots level to create a skill set which will propel entities, especially in the SME bracket, above their competitors. And starting with that generates the improvements, the efficiency, the knowledge that then can utilize the bottom-up approach to make its way and grow the business and the commercial resilience within.
Thank you so much. If Maen would like.
No, going back to the position of the GCC, I mean, you are sitting here. It's the heart of GCC and the reflection of what's happening in UAE. You're seeing it across, borders. So there is no doubt that GCC is going to be heavily investing into infrastructures. A lot of projects have been announced. A lot of projects are underway. And I loved, coming through with Captain Saif, who represents, Abu Dhabi ports, saying that, despite the fact that DP World is next door, but everybody is growing at a fast pace, So that shows the demand. We're seeing a lot of opportunities. There's, a major infrastructure being built in Saudi Arabia on the eastern side. There is some also on the western, and you see it also all the way to Kuwait, including Iraq. And a big part of it is the historical positioning of the GCC, but also what we used to watch and hear, which is the Silk Road. Is this going to be an enabler to revamp the Silk Road that was taken the east to west through the GCC? And the answer is yes, because for you to then continue building that link on land is also happening. So the GCC, Maritime and Marine and port infrastructure is solid, is there, will continue to grow, and the investment opportunities in it is something that's encouraging a lot of us. And we as a company, we announced this actually 2 weeks ago during EDIPEC. We are joining a very reputable Maritime, which is an Egyptian-based company, into establishing the biggest OSV company in the region out of Abu Dhabi global markets. So it will be based here. It's announced to be called One Marine. And collaboration, I love also what was mentioned earlier, is that collaboration is going to be the key for everybody's growth.
Big collaboration and demand, this is the drivers. So we have a little bit of time. If our delighted audience has some questions, I welcome to have some questions from the audience.
Thank you very much. As Captain Saif mentioned, in terms of the new generation of fuel, and also we know about the hydrogen and the role of hydrogen, the crucial role of hydrogen in the more sustainable maritime industry. Where are we basically in terms of implementation? If you could tell us more about the new generation fuel that you are applying basically, and the potential of basically having the time frame to have hydrogen in this regard in the maritime industry. Thank you.
Hydrogen is already in use. There are a number of technologies which already have hydrogen as fuel. The problem is the production in the required demand. And
Like
even,
SAF.
yeah, if the production is there, the cost of production. And then you will put to it that the engines of larger ships, adaptation or modification for the hydrogen. And then there is multiple complication. Then the storage of the hydrogen itself on board the ships or in the major storages. So there are challenges. It is the cleanest alternative fuel, and it's available in abundance of it, like it's in the air. It is just, there are challenges which I mentioned. With currently whatever R&Ds is happening, or let's call it prototype vessels that is running, still these challenges exist. So it is highly costly, challenges in storage, challenges in engines, but I believe that it will be a major thing in the future. It is just we need to work harder in technologies to address these challenges. The same with the green ammonia, the same with e-methanol. All of them are great alternative fuels. It is just each one of them have its own problems, its own challenges. Even biofuel has its own challenges. It is just how we make these challenges easier, how we overcome them, how we make it more affordable. So this is what we will need to work on in the remaining time we have.
Any timeline here in the Middle East, timelines for implementation
I
here?
didn't see any timeline. There was, for example, in Abu Dhabi, without mentioning specific names, there were two major ammonia plants were planned to be built. And that's like 5 years ago or something. And then, and they were put on hold. Not because it is, they cannot do it. The technology to produce is there. There is no financial feasibility. So as well as it is, you can call it chicken and egg situation. So the vessels will say, okay, we will not convert until we have the fuel. The fuel say we will not produce until you have the vessels. So this is the challenge we have. But I feel if there is a strong collaboration between public and private sector, then the first movers can come in, and then it will make the the wheel moving.
Thank you.
Yes, my question is to Mr. Captain Saif. My name is Hari. I'm an energy auditor and solution provider. With respect to the sustainable transportation, first thing comes to our mind is like the container vessels that is transporting the thing. But when you see on the other aspect, on the scale of growing global tourism, there is a leisure transportation as well, where many of the people own the private yachts and other skiing activities, so they do consume emissions and consume fuel. So on that aspect, there is a growing global tourism. So for controlling the emissions of the private vessels like yachts and this recreational tourism, so what is your take on how to do the regulation-wise, how to control their emission, whether how to standardize those things? Like, what is your take on that?
Yeah, we mentioned that there are commitments toward net zero, but there are no framework has been adopted or an obligation has been done so far. UAE in general has a UAE net zero 2050 target, but globally there were effort done by the International Maritime Organization to put regulations, to put the framework how to reach net zero by 2050. These regulations were, the framework, let's call it, were completed and approved by the Environment Committee in IMO in March this year. And it was supposed to be adopted, the voting for adaptation in mid of October, last month. And because of certain challenges and preference, the voting has been postponed to next year. But that doesn't mean that there are no regulations. There is support. There is companies and shipping working in the EU. They have to abide by the European regulations toward the carbon emissions, taxation, etc. But globally, not yet there. But that doesn't mean we stop and wait. We are working towards sustainability. And as mentioned in here, that sustainability is not an obstacle toward growth. It is an enabler to grow.
This is exciting. It's the vision and how you combine it is just not stopping you to move forward with initiatives. And I'm so thankful for this valuable conversation. I always hope after each dialogue that these outcomes can expand the room of the audience and bring to the actions and expand and implement on an everyday basis. And thank you so much for being with us here on the stage. And I think it was a great dialogue. Thank you.